The Boys, Season 2. Let's go. So I'm gonna come right out and say this season took a little longer to get going than the first. This is in part due to the design of Season 1 ending on a cliffhanger, which means Season 2 feels like it begins in the middle of a story arc. I was more interested in the episodes during the second half of the season, and I think that overall Season 1 was stronger, but Season 2 is still very good. As far as similarities to the comic, this season is loosely based, and I mean really loosely based on the Self-Preservation Society, a story arc that occurred between issues 31 and 33, so it was a rather short arc. In fact, the only similarity is with the character of Stormfront, who is male in the comic but female in the show. This is basically Stormfront's season, as a lot of the plot ends up revolving around her character. This is going to contain spoilers for Season 2, though the biggest spoilers won't be revealed until the Stormfront section. Let's start off by catching up with some characters from Season 1. Giancarlo Esposito brings some serious Gus Fring energy to the role of Stan Edgar, who is now basically the James Stillwell of the show. He is unflinching in the face of Homelander, bringing about a whole new power structure, as Vought, the makers of the drug Compound V, are really the ones in charge, not the supes who rely on the drug. Meanwhile, Homelander is attempting to assert himself as a perfect father figure, and he's coming across like a total maniac.
How about some Jiffy Pop?
That scene where he's drinking Madeline's milk, Madeline, who he lasered in the face at the end of Season 1, that's pretty disturbing. The milk drinking more than the face lasering. There are several scenes of him sucking down milk like a psycho. Homelander spends Season 2 being taken down a notch by Stormfront and Stan Edgar, and he is somewhat humanized despite his terrible actions so far. Homelander is aware that he is psychologically damaged, and he wants to spare his son of the same fate. So he is actually more complicated than just an evil Superman character like in the movie Brightburn, which wasn't very good. Another returning minor character from Season 1 is Grace Mallory, the founder of The Boys, who has been gender swapped here from Greg Mallory in the comic book. This does change the character's backstory, as in the comic Mallory served in World War II, and the implementation of superheroes there was a catastrophic failure. So characters like Huey and Butcher in the comic are more homophobic and misogynistic, but I don't think the work itself is inherently those things. I think that by giving our heroes these flaws, it makes for a more nuanced look at the idea of heroes and villains that comic book writing often oversimplifies. The show has made Huey and Butcher less complicated in those regards because of some of the criticism people have had about the comic. For example, in the comic, Butcher and Agent Raynor have a secret relationship, and often partake in some really rough, hatred-fueled sex. In Season 1, Raynor had a single line of dialogue referencing that they used to have a relationship, but that this has ended, and in Episode 1 of Season 2, her head explodes. So that's different. Lamplighter is revealed to be alive this season, and I enjoyed his story arc, though it was a short one. In the comic, Lamplighter burned Mallory's grandchildren alive, but sadistically felt no remorse. This is the reason he was kicked off the Seven, as it was too far even for them. In the show, Lamplighter thought it was Grace Mallory in the bed and now regrets murdering her children. He earns a little more sympathy here.
I didn't know that you were gonna be in that bed. It was supposed to be your boss.
Huey and Lamplighter's discussion about cucks had some really funny writing in it too.
I'm the cuck.
You're the cuck fluffer.
To talk about Lamplighter from the comic, I have to talk about women in refrigerators. There is a feminist criticism that female characters are too often killed to provide a motivation for a male character. The idea of a woman being murdered and stuffed into a refrigerator comes from a Green Lantern comic. When male characters are killed off in comics, they are usually resurrected and brought back. In The Boys, instead of Lamplighter coming back in a glorious scene like Gandalf the White, he comes back brain dead and covered in his own feces. Ennis had to have been having a little fun playing around with people's conceptions of these tropes. Does The Boys fridge women? Yeah, I suppose so, because Huey's motivation was the death of Robin. But if it had been someone else like his father who had been killed, I still think the story could have worked. So the gender of the character who provided the motivation is not as important to me as the result of the action. being that Huey joins a war against superheroes and begins to experience PTSD as the war continues. Butcher is absent from the first episode, and I think this is maybe why things take so long to get going here. There was an online short that showed Butcher waking up in the middle of nowhere, filling us in on his whereabouts between Season 1 and Season 2. The scene felt totally unnecessary, but it's cool that it exists. The rest of the boys aren't really doing much the first few episodes. Huey tries to be the leader, but he really doesn't have it in him. They all argue a bunch and nothing gets done. After returning, Butcher spends most of this season trying to rescue Becca from Vought, though we do get some insight into his backstory in episode 7, Butcher, Baker, Candlestick Maker, where John Noble plays his father. John Noble played Denethor in The Lord of the Rings, and he was Walter Bishop on the TV show Fringe.
Oh! What? What happened?
I just pissed myself.
The Butcher, Baker, Candlestick Maker comic story arc was separate from the main series and told Butcher's backstory. It is framed around Billy Butcher alone talking to the corpse of his recently deceased father, who he hated. His father was an alcoholic and abused Billy's mother, although she couldn't bring herself to leave him. Billy had a brother named Lenny, who at one point stopped his brother Billy from murdering their father. In the comic, Lenny was hit by a bus, but in the show, he apparently committed suicide. Lenny was more compassionate and sensitive than Billy, causing their father to not deem him a real man. This is all briefly referenced in the show. The first 3 episodes set up the story of a soup terrorist who has been smuggled in by a group that the boys are hiding out with, called the Haitian Kings. The terrorist ends up being Kimiko's brother, Kenji. He is not from the comic, but his inclusion gives us more insight into Kimiko's character. Kimiko does not talk in either the comic or the show. However, Kenji can use sign language but doesn't speak English. So there are some scenes with subtitles that fill us in on the bond that the brother and sister share. In the comic, Kimiko gets a 1-issue backstory, and so does the Frenchman. They're kind of one-note characters there. The Frenchman's backstory seems to be all make-believe. The female's backstory is that she, one day as a child, was brought to work at Vought by her mother and snuck off to fall in some Compound V. After that, she just started killing a lot of people. I think the show has given more insight into these characters by treating them with a little more depth. Speaking of depth, the Deep is being recruited by this Scientology-esque cult, who is going to rehabilitate his image and get him back into the Seven. He is first approached by this superhero, Eagle the Archer, who is a Green Arrow or Hawkeye parody in the show, but a Hawkman parody in the comic. Eagle the Archer is barely in the comic. There's an earlier version who fights in World War II and does a really bad job at it, and there's a modern-day version who is talked about, but only seen in a single panel on the cover of a comic book given to Huey. I do like that in the show they use him to question the idea of a superhero with no powers who fights only using a bow and arrow. During the Deep's initiation, he is tripping on hallucinogens and his gills start talking to him, his gills being voiced by Patton Oswalt. Then the gills start singing "You Are So Beautiful," and he starts singing back, and it reaches a cringe level of awkwardness, but it's also so delightfully weird that it's kind of funny. Episode 3, Over the Hill with the Swords of a Thousand Men, also kind of rehashes the joke with the dolphin from Season 1, except with a whale. By the way, the name of this episode is one of the big final comic book story arcs, and it's named after a song by an English punk band named Ten Pole Tudor. It's a cool song worth checking out. So the fact remains that the Deep is a sexual predator, but the writers managed to humanize him a little this season. It's suggested that his abuse of women stems from his own insecurity of having gills, which are openings into his body, making him feel emasculated. None of this excuses his actions, and he is still the kind of guy who listens to Goo Goo Dolls when he's tripping. A-Train gets kicked off the Seven and joins the cult as well. This was all a pretty minor part of the story, and it provides a few laughs, but A-Train doesn't do much else this season. Starlight begins the season attempting to acquire samples of Compound V by blackmailing her old friend Gecko, who can cut off his limbs and have them quickly grow back. This results in some funny out-of-context dialogue.
For an extra grand, I'll let you chop off my dick.
Starlight is not the naive country girl that she began as, and she's getting her hands dirty now. Her conflict with her overbearing mother continues in this season as well, and this adds depth to her character that was never present in the comic. Starlight begins to question what it really means to kill, and to become comfortable with it, providing an internal conflict with her character, the same kind of conflict that Huey deals with. Nothing Like It in the World is a hangout episode with Huey, MM, and Annie taking a road trip, and the plot takes a backseat to character development, which is actually nice. Annie is beginning to function as a member of the boys, and though this is a deviation from the comic, it makes sense. Nothing Like It in the World is also the episode where everyone hooks up. Huey and Annie get it on, Billy and Becca get it on, even Homelander and Stormfront get down and dirty.
Don't be a pussy, laser my fucking tits.
Yeah, that's pretty dirty. Nothing Like It in the World slowed down the pacing a little after the heavy lifting of the first 3 episodes to re-establish the characters and introduce Stormfront. So what do I think of Aya Cash's Stormfront? This is definitely pretty different from the comic. In the comic, Stormfront is one of the first superheroes created by the Nazis, and his DNA was used to create the American superhero, Homelander. Stormfront in the comic is portrayed as an over-the-top cartoonish example of a Nazi stereotype. He walks around saying things like American swine. He is the leader of a group called Payback, a group once run by the patriotic Super Soldier, but now taken over by Stormfront. The female stabs out Stormfront's eye, making him an even bigger stereotype with the eye patch. And the boys later all kick him to death in a scene that is pure wish fulfillment. This is a World War II metaphor, as Butcher is British, MM is American, the Frenchman is French obviously, and Love Sausage, who is Russian, joins in. Who is Love Sausage, you may ask? He's in the prison break scene of the show. He's kinda hard to miss.
God damn. Brother's got a love sausage.
I can't unsee that now that it's been seen. In the show, it's the female characters, Starlight, Kimiko, and Maeve, who kick the shit out of Stormfront. This usually would be the kind of hit-you-over-the-head female empowerment messaging that makes me roll my eyes, but it worked here. Probably because I knew it was a reference to something from the comic, and also that having male characters kick a female character to death could create backlash, even if that female character is a Nazi. So this wasn't as cringe for me as that scene in Endgame. When I saw that in the theater, my eyes rolled about as hard as the audience was applauding.
Girls get it done.
And cut a rehearsal, no one move, no one move,
How does the show handle Stormfront? First of all, Season 2 might have spent a little too much time in the first 3 episodes setting up Kenji just to kill him off because it would give Kimiko more motivation to hate Stormfront, and also serve as the big reveal that Stormfront is a secret Nazi. At first, Stormfront is portrayed as a woke environmentalist and feminist who has an abundance of social media followers.
Do not waste your hard-earned cash on this shitty, big-titted hunk of plastic that'll probably end up in a manatee's belly when your kid chucks it in the garbage.
She is the first supervillain that I've seen that has weaponized meme culture, and I think this is all relevant and interesting. I thought the character was annoying and unlikable from the start. It was obvious that she was the big bad for the season. However, the creators of the show intended for episode 3 to be a big twist.
So, you know, for the first couple of episodes, Stormfront's kind of endearing, right? She's sassy and she's funny and she's chatty and she gives a bit of lip to Homelander and
This might have been because I knew Stormfront from the comic. I mean, even the character's name is a website for white supremacists. I've never been on it, and I would advise people to steer clear of places like that on the internet. The Stormfront storyline here is meant to show how people in positions of power can sway public opinion towards extremist ideology via social media and through the manipulation of algorithms which send people down rabbit holes and trap them in echo chambers, where they are only seeing and hearing information which serves to reinforce things that they already believe. These beliefs can become dangerous when they're dogmatic, and without the ability to ever see the counter-argument from the other side, people are pushed further and further towards extremes. On the opposite side of Stormfront is Victoria Newman, who is Victor Newman in the comics, so we've got another gender swap here. It's fine, the boy still has a lot of solid male characters. Victor Newman, or Vic the Veep, is the vice president, though he's actually a Vought puppet who has been planted to take over as soon as Vought can get rid of the president, who is not too keen on the idea of superheroes in the military. Vic the Veep is portrayed as being really stupid, like possibly suffering from brain damage. The Boys was written in a post-9/11 world, and Vic the Veep is obviously a parody of George W. Bush, who is often seen as being kind of dumb. Victoria Newman in the show is a media-savvy senator who speaks out against big corporations. She seems to sort of be a parallel to AOC, but it's possible that she will turn out to be working for Vought. In the head explosion scene, of which there are many this season, I forgot to mention how gory this show is. I guess I'm desensitized to it. She is likely covering up for Vought by exploding Vogelbaum's head. Becca Butcher gets fridged this season. In the comics, she is seen during the Butcher Baker Candlestick Maker arc, where she is the only thing in Butcher's life that keeps him from becoming a monster like his father. She is raped by Homelander, but keeps it a secret from Butcher. He only finds out after her death when he obtains her diary, and the diary entry is brutal to read. She gives birth to a baby with Homelander's powers and dies in the process. Butcher kills the baby in self-defense. The baby here is actually similar to the laser baby from the first season. So in the show, Becca dies, but the child lives, and Becca's dying wish is to not let the child become corrupted, giving Butcher a motivation that is more complex than simply getting revenge on Homelander. It's the child himself who accidentally causes his mother's death while attacking Stormfront. I really like that The Boys doesn't shy away from some controversial issues. In the first season, it spent a lot of time making fun of the Hollywood elite through the Seven, and here it more specifically takes on the problems of our culture's obsession with social media, which can often be quite unhealthy. The Boys pushes the bounds for violence and language, but more importantly, it provides a reflection of our own society. It had some pacing issues at the start, and I thought some of the social commentary was a little too on the nose. Still, I like that they have the balls to attempt some social commentary, while a lot of shows just play it safe to appease everybody.
You have balls. I like balls.